Hi everyone, my name is Matt Williams. I'm a tutor in politics here at the University of Oxford. I'm often asked whether or not you have to be some sort of natural born genius with a massive IQ to study here in Oxford. And the honest answer is no, you don't. And in fact, I have some severe misgivings about IQ as a test of intelligence. I think it's actually possibly even immoral, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail later. But first of all, what even is IQ? Well, it stands for Intelligence Quotient, and it's a battery of tests that looks at your capacities to reason with words, to reason with numbers, spatial reasoning, and also things like your memory. Now, part of the reason why we don't use it as a part of our admissions process is because we use other standardized tests which are more specific, more specialized. See, one of the issues with the IQ test is that it's far too broad, but it's also simultaneously and paradoxically too narrow, and I'll explain why in a second. So it's too broad in the sense that, let's say you're applying for mathematics, you might have dyslexia, or you might have just a general disinterest in words and literature, and so you wouldn't perform terribly well on standardized tests of your verbal reasoning abilities, and yet IQ would include that, so you might not perform terribly well. Conversely, let's say you're applying for English literature here in Oxford and you're dyscalculic, you struggle with numbers, you might have dysgraphia, so you struggle with spatial reasoning. We're not looking for people that are generalists, we're looking for specialists here in Oxford. So your capacity to be good at everything is not very useful, so hence we don't use standardized tests that are as broad as IQ. But another problem related to that is that the IQ test is too narrow, paradoxically. So it's too broad in the sense that it tests all sorts of skills that you just don't need for most of our degrees. And it's too narrow in the sense that it excludes so many other facets of intelligence that are really important, such as creativity. What's sometimes called fluid intelligence is not tested at all. And we consider that to be really important, and that's why we have interviews to try and see how creative you could be, how well you can think on your feet, how well you can contribute to new understandings. Because of course IQ tests can be practiced, they can be improved upon. You can get better, in short. And so it's not going to be particularly good for testing your creativity, and that's why we use interviews. Now, I promised to talk about some of my misgivings about the morality of IQ. Essentially, they come down to this, that the IQ test was developed in order to prove that some people were genetically superior to others. And that is, of course, a terrible thing. And it's shown in the flaws of the test, because the test, in its initial creation, was designed to show that white men were superior to people of colour and to women. And the test was severely tilted in favour of people that had had a basic education. And this shows not only a moral problem with the origins of the test, but also a practical problem. It doesn't actually measure your intelligence. What it measures is your capacity to get good at standardized tests. Because of course, you don't have an intelligence quotient. You don't have a fixed level of intelligence that is carried around with you for the whole of your life. You have an adaptive capability. Sure, there are some genetic gifts that some people have, but they only account for a tiny proportion of your success in applying to universities like this. It's a bit like saying that someone who's slightly taller than average is going to be automatically the best basketball player in the world, but that's obviously not true. You would need to commit yourself to all sorts of practice and other sort of forms of skills improvement in order to be a good basketball player, and exactly the same is true of intelligence. So that's why we don't use the intelligence test, and frankly why it's completely unhelpful. And one thing that is the upshot of all of this is that we're looking for people that are committed, we're looking for people that are hardworking, we're not just looking for people that are natural born geniuses, whatever that may mean. So if you, like me, are not necessarily considered a genius, or you don't consider yourself a genius, but you're committed and you're hardworking, then you should 100% apply to a university like Oxford. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to see people that have specialized skills, but also people that can be really creative. So don't worry about IQ. If you don't have a super high IQ, doesn't matter. We'd love to work with you. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. All the best. Bye.